Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just back again with another video in my series looking at prophetic books. And so I'm just reading them, going through all of them and just seeing, just in general reading them, but also looking for any verses that relate to the end times and seeing how it matches up with what I presented in the book of Revelation. And so I came across Daniel chapter 12, and it has a couple verses specifically relating to the end times. And I'm going to go through Daniel 12, 11, and 12, and this is going to be a little bit more cryptic in terms of how it's referencing the end times, but it's worthwhile looking at because it actually gives us some more time frames, the length of two time periods that are very, very important, and it will help us understand, in the very least, Daniel chapter 12. And so here is the image that I took, the slide that I took from my Revelation presentation. Nothing will change here. We're just going to add one piece at the end, and I'll explain where that's coming from. And so this is, what I believe that the end times will look like in terms of the sequence of events. And the most important event is the 144,000 being taken away prior to the 3.5-year Great Tribulation period. And I'll explain in Daniel that he reaffirms this as well, this sequence of events, and adds one extra thing on the end from the book of 2nd Ezra. So another view of that is in terms of three woes. And so the first woe has passed in history. I don't think anyone would argue that. The second woe is still to come, and it is encapsulated by the Great Tribulation period. And the third woe is God's wrath. And the amazing thing about Daniel in this chapter is it gives us a length of time of how long that third woe will be, and then it gives us a length of time for an event right after it. And then that is the absolute end of the end, and then the kingdom of heaven is established. And so the piece that Daniel will add is this extra 45-day period. And so before we get to this picture, I'll just quickly read the book of Daniel, the two verses that I'm talking about. And so Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 reads, and from the time, I'll just quickly read verse 8 to kind of explain what this is all about. Daniel's asking, and I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? Again, all the prophets are constantly asking, when's the end? When's the end? They want the kingdom to be established, like we all should. Verse 9, and he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the end of the time. And that also is a reference to the book of Revelation having 7 seals, and I went through that in my video. And those can only be loosed by Jesus Christ, in his sacrifice on the cross. And then after that, those seals began to be loosed. Verse 10, many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And so that many shall be purified and made white is referencing the Great Tribulation period of 3.5 years, where that is the, quote, mixed multitude. And, they will be given robes and be tempted with the mark of the beast. And those who refuse will be, as written here, purified and made white. Verse 11, this is what I want to focus on. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So this is strange, because in Revelation we've seen 1,260 days for the 3.5-year period. So the natural question is, what are these extra 30 days? And then it's made even more sort of vague. In verse 12 it says, blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days. So now there's a 1,335. There's 1,335 days that's being referenced. And then in verse 13, but go thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So now we have to deal with verse 11 with a couple of cryptic kind of statements, and then these two different time windows. And so it's actually not that difficult to understand. First, verse 11 says, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away. That's encoded and describing the 144,000 taken away. And so one would then wonder, well, how does daily sacrifice link up to 144,000 and God's elect? And so for that, we'd have to go to the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 7:26-27 reads, "For such a high priest became us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and made higher than the heavens." That's referring to Jesus Christ. Verse 27, "Who needeth not daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifice, first for his own sins, and then for the people's. For this he did once when he offered up himself." And so it's in Hebrews here in 27, it's linking up high priests who are offering up daily sacrifices. And so a high priest and daily sacrifice is being used interchangeably by Daniel. Again, this is code. This is for people, modern day evangelical sort of Christians who believe that the end times will be in the Middle East. It's to kind of get them away, and give them a reason to think that it's actually the physical temple in the Middle East, in Israel. But for those who have understanding, we know that that is referring to the elect taken away. And so now we'd have to understand, well, how does high priest refer to the elect? And that's in Revelation 1 verse 6. "And hath made us kings and priests unto God. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever." And so God's objective for his elect is to make them unto kings and priests. And so using Hebrews and using Revelation, we see that verse 11 is referring to this quote-unquote rapture, this taking away of God's elect. And so the sequence of events still holds. And then the abomination that maketh desolate set up refers to the Great Tribulation period, where desolation, if you think of it as just killing everything, it's also another term for it is depopulation. And so that is now referring to the Great Tribulation period. And so, again, the sequence holds. The first step is always the elect taken away. The second step is the Great Tribulation, which is represented by the abomination that make desolate, or think of it as depopulate. And that time period will be 1,290 days. And so the cool thing about Daniel is that he tells us now, which we didn't know otherwise, that this God's wrath, the period is actually 30 days. And so the 1260, those days hold from the book of Revelation. Then the 30 days is the time of God's wrath, where he is now destroying everybody on the left-hand side with the mark of the beast. And then this extra 45 days, which is coming from verse 12, "Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days," is referring to 2 Ezra 13:50. And if you read that whole chapter, verse 50 says, "And then he will show them many wonders." So this is after this God's wrath has taken place. God has a remnant of people that are inhabiting lands that no one even knows exists, and he will bring them out from their land and then show them many wonders. And from what Daniel's saying, that will take 45 more days. And so from the time that the elect are saved, taken, redeemed, delivered from the entire earth, which will cause and motivate the world to not just implement but force the mark of the beast, from that point on there will be 1,335 days until it's truly the sort of end of the end. And so this is the insight that Daniel gives us. Again, the sequence of events is consistent. It's the elect raptured. In this case, he's using coded language, again, because this is needed for people like the Pastor Andersons and the other end times people, the Ken Hovens, who anybody like that, their narrative will be that the end times is in the Middle East, when many of us, we know through the Spirit that the end times is actually focused in America, and then it will not get quote unquote kicked off until the elect are, like what's written here, taken away. And instead of writing the elect, Daniel is using coded language and referring to them as the daily sacrifice, because that's what the high priests do, and that is God's objective for the elect, to make them into high priests. So that's again, it's a little bit coded, but probably trickier than any of the other ones that I'll post. But again, we see that the end times is following a very, very strict sequence of events and in a very, very rigid time frame. And so this is encouraging, because whenever this event happens, if we see it in our lifetime of the elect being raptured, we can be comforted that the end is very near. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.